started this month, last Sunday, talking about the spirituality of Charles Fillmore and Albert Einstein, who I consider to be kindred spirits on a common spiritual path, even though their paths never crossed personally. Now, Einstein, remember, he wanted to know God's thoughts. This is what he said. He said, I want to know how God created this world. I am not interested in this or that phenomenon, in the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know his thoughts. The rest are details. Charles Fillmore, our co-founder in Unity, he talked about God in a very similar way. He used the word mind with a capital M as synonymous with God. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because thoughts and mind go together. Charles said this. He said, by the term mind, we mean God, the universal principle which includes all principles. God is the original mind in which all real ideas exist. Now, Einstein used the word God very freely, even though he was very clear about the fact that he didn't believe in a personal or a supernatural kind of God. He considered himself to be a student of the great philosopher and theologian Baruch Spinoza. Einstein said this. He said, we followers of Spinoza seek out God in the wonderful order and lawfulness of all that exists and in its soul as it reveals itself in man and animal. And of course, this shouldn't come as any surprise to anyone that in some of his writings, Charles Fillmore speaks with great admiration for Baruch Spinoza. So these are the kind of synchronicities and the kind of ideas that really attracted me to Unity in the first place. And I think that's probably because, like maybe a lot of you out there, we grew up and we were taught to look at God like this, right? Those are beautiful, magnificent works of art. And it's an example of something that human beings like to do. What we like to do is we will create God in our own image and likeness instead of trying to figure out how that should work the other way around. And at one point, a long time ago, that was the best that we could do. God was simply a larger, more powerful, and invisible version of us. And so inevitably, God starts to take on other human characteristics like jealousy, anger, vengeance, wrath. We actually succeeded in making God small and petty. And that's why I think the expansive vision of God that we get from Einstein and Charles Fillmore, this vision of God as this vast, creative mind in which all real ideas exist, that's why that can be so attractive to people who are looking for a new vision to replace that old one. And yet there's a question that always comes up. Just how is this new way of thinking and talking about God more useful or practical than the old way? What's in it for me? That's a valid question. This isn't supposed to be some kind of an academic training exercise. We need to do some of that, of course, but if we can't put it to work in some way that makes our existence maybe a little bit easier or just a little more joyful, then what's the point in a new expansive vision? And I'll just cut to the chase here, so to speak, and I'll answer that question for y'all. There is nothing more useful or practical or important or powerful than cultivating a new vision of the infinite scope and power of that which we call God. It has the potential to change you completely. It's the key to shifting from a consciousness of lack, victimhood, powerlessness, and unworthiness, shifting from all of that, put that aside, who wants that? We shift from that to being co-creators with God, and what we are co-creating with God from that new vision is the very best experience of life that we are capable of imagining. That's what's in it for us. God as mind is something practical that I can relate to because I know what it's like to be self-aware, to be alive. I know what it's like to be creative and to experience so many different things. And yet, I have no delusion that I can ever fully understand or explain everything about God as mind. But just because I can't completely define it doesn't mean we can't experience that presence and power. Richard and Mary Jaffola are Unity ministers who talked about explaining the mystery of God by using a watermelon seed as an example. They asked people to picture or imagine a watermelon seed. It's healthy, it's black, it's plump, it's shiny. A watermelon seed is no bigger than, what, maybe my fingernail? Pretty tiny, right? And yet, that little tiny seed contains the power to draw from the earth and from the sun enough energy to grow to 14,000 times its own weight. Now that's kind of amazing. That's kind of miraculous. It's pretty impressive. And it tastes pretty good to boot, right? I mean, there's the payoff. And then it goes ahead and it produces a couple hundred more seeds and the whole process starts over again. I mean, how does it know how to do that? Well, scientists will say, well, duh, DNA, of course. Well, okay. But where does the idea of DNA come from? What was it about the Big Bang that made a watermelon possible? Huh? For that matter, what was it about the Big Bang that made you and I possible? What was it that made us inevitable? What was it that made consciousness inevitable? If we could explain that, we could maybe explain the mystery of God. But do we really have to do that? I don't think so. Don't get me wrong, we should try. We need to explore, we need to learn, and try to explain our world. But just because sometimes our reach may exceed our grasp doesn't mean we failed. Because it's the process, it's the journey that really matters. Vincent van Gogh once said that the best way to know God is to love many things. I like that. As many things as we can in this short existence we have on this planet. That's not a bad personal mission statement, is it? To try to love God to try to know God by loving as many things as we can during our time on this planet. It means we have to be engaged in reality instead of shoving it off or trying to hide from it or deny it. And creation isn't a done deal. It isn't over. We have a role in it. The universe isn't a static thing. It's a process of creative becoming. We have a say in where we're going as a species. And that means that we have to be engaged on a number of different levels. It means we have to be consciously or mindfully engaged in this process of daily living. What we do matters. That makes us co-creators with God. And the very future of our evolution depends on the choices and the decisions and how completely we are engaged with reality. And if that sounds like a lot of responsibility, it is. Why would we want it any other way? Sure, we're free to abdicate that responsibility as co-creators. We can try to hide from reality. And if we do that, think about what we're really saying. When we try to abdicate our responsibility as co-creators, we're saying, well, I really don't matter. I don't have any power. And all that does is it takes us back to lack consciousness and victimhood. There's this old saying, I'm sure everyone's heard this before. With God, all things are possible. I don't take that literally. I hope that doesn't come as a shock to anyone, but I don't think it's within our power to suspend the law of gravity or maybe make time go backwards. I prefer to say that with God, more things are possible than we can imagine. And that's a powerful affirmation because we human beings can sure imagine a lot of powerful things, right? Well, it all starts with trust. And I prefer the word trust over faith because for too many people, the word faith means blind belief. And you know what? The universe, reality, doesn't care what we believe. I might believe that I can defy gravity. The universe says if I step off the edge of that roof, I'm going to fall. And I better trust that. The universe works whether I believe in it or not. In fact, I think that's a great definition of reality. Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. That's from the great science fiction author Philip K. Dick. The best response to reality is to get to know it and then learn how to trust it. And that involves a shift from belief to trust. Hey, let's face it. We're in a relationship with the universe, aren't we? We're in a relationship with God itself. And we all know that a lack of trust in a relationship, is that a good thing? A lack of trust in a relationship is a recipe for disaster. So, do we trust it? Can we accept the possibility that at least from the perspective of this grand universe, everything may be right on schedule? God is mind, has all the ideas necessary to help us navigate this reality and cope with the challenges that we face. Trust and co-creation means that we need to stop assuming that we know how best things are supposed to go in the world. We who can't explain how a watermelon seed operates, we think we know how things are supposed to work best in the universe. Maybe we can let that go. Trying to create a challenge-free existence is futile. In this universe, things break, things change. Human beings have the capacity to show compassion and love, and they can choose to kill. That's reality. Every challenge the world faces is really an opportunity to grow in consciousness and to come up with a creative solution in cooperation with the universe to meet that challenge. So, in the face of even the most unpleasant or perhaps even violent reality, are we willing to trust that the universe has all of the ideas that we need to co-create a better world? There's a book Unity publishes called The Eye of the Storm by Reverend Gary Simmons. The Eye of the Storm, Embracing Conflict and Creating Peace. And in the book, the key idea is this one. He says, no one is against you. This is the absolute truth. You may not believe it now. You may have a lifetime of evidence to the contrary, but until you realize that the entire universe is for you, you may never experience your wholeness and your true worth. Despite the fact that crazed people with guns may want to shoot us, despite the fact that our atmosphere is capable of producing storms that can level entire towns, the universe still provides everything that we need to get through those events and come out on the other side as wiser and more compassionate human beings, if we choose. We might have a lifetime of evidence to the contrary, right? And we may be justified in concluding that the universe is actually out to kill us. The universe is out to get us. But I ask you, is that helpful? Is that, in the least, empowering? I like to say that truth is aligned with that which empowers us. The universe is for us. It can be trusted. God is for us and can be trusted. Now that's empowering. God isn't testing us. The universe isn't testing us. We're testing ourselves to see if we're in touch with the power that the universe gives us, to see if we're in touch with it in a way that allows us to make it real. And when we talk about the will of God, that's really all that that means. The will of God is only that we come to know that we're co-creators, that we come to know our own part as conscious entities and manifestations of mind, and then trust that power and use it for good, despite the fact that others can use it for evil, despite the fact that storms happen and people die. Does any of this sound useful or practical? I think, maybe the next time someone asks me if I believe in God, I think I'm going to tell them, no. I trust reality. And that's sufficient. I can't explain everything about how this universe works, but I can tell you for certain that it does work and we can trust it. We covered this back in February, but let's review it again, because we know that the universe can be trusted to do three things, all right? First, the universe is always moving toward greater expressions of life and consciousness. This is good news because life and consciousness are going to become more pervasive and apparent to us. We're going to see it not only at our level, but all the way down to the level of subatomic particles. We're going to have a greater experience of the kind of creative power and consciousness in the universe, because that's the way it works. Number two, the universe is always moving toward greater expressions of caring and compassion. That's good news because it means that we will eventually learn how to get along. And finally, the universe and the creatures in it can be counted on to come up with creative and beneficial solutions to seemingly insurmountable challenges. Global warming starting to look like a problem. No solution in sight? Don't bet on it. Same thing for the other challenges we face, provided we don't hide from them. Provided we remember that when we trust the universe, more things are possible than we can imagine. When we trust God, more things are possible than we can imagine. See you next time.